Welcome to Don't Encourage, a show where we talk about the big ideas behind fiction projects of all different kinds. Books, movies, TV shows, video games, nothing's off limits. I'm your host, Patrick Bateman, and I'm here with my co-host, Dexter Morgan. How you doing, Dexter?
Doing great as always, Patrick.
Excellent. Today we'll be discussing the 2010 South Korean horror thriller, I Saw the Devil. But first, what's been on your list this week?
This week, I haven't really been watching too much Netflix, but I figured I'd mention our sponsor of the show. No, this week I've been taking it easy. I've been doing some more reading. I'm reading this book by Bill Bryson. It's about the history of your home, which seems really like a boring topic, but it's fascinating. It goes back through medieval times and how we started using tables and chairs and why the home developed the way it did. It's actually kind of fascinating. Like this idea of room and board. The board part is because when people came over for dinner, you'd literally hand them a board and they put it on their lap to eat on. So
Really?
The concept of tables wasn't a thing, I think, until the 1300s or something.
Huh.
There's a lot of fun facts in there like that.
That sounds like the next IKEA space saver.
Right? It could be.
A stack of boards leaning against the wall so you have all that extra floor space, and the assembly's easier.
I think we're going backwards. We're going back to medieval times.
The old ideas are the good ideas.
Oldies with coldies. And this idea that furniture should be mobile, that was another big one. The idea that you would furnish a house that you were going to be in for a really long time because people were, wandering, trying to find the best places to live. They needed stuff that they could grab very quickly.
Oh.
So that's why furniture kind of started developing. It took a long time for it to develop in the way that we know of it now, which was kind of fascinating. It talks about flooring, how flooring for centuries was just a bunch of dried hay. And it was there was so much disease because of it. There would be animals who would live in this hay.
Yeah, of course, ticks and little bugs and arachnids.
Rats and everything. They would all live in there.
Huh.
It was called thrash. And they would just layer it.
Wow.
Layer, old layer, new layer, new layer, new layer. Just I think they did it maybe once or twice a year, if that. They would just put down new hay.
Wow.
And not clean the old one.
They lived like pet rabbits or hamsters.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. And that's why the plague proliferated the way it did. Because of these types of conditions.
Uh-huh.
It would be a great breeding ground for disease.
That's so interesting.
So there's a lot of...
And it's not a fire hazard at all either.
No, not at all. Not at all. And the development of the fireplace and how that came about, how they had wood burning stoves inside the house. So of course they would fill the whole house up with smoke. And during medieval times, they thought the smoke was really good for you. And people were really skeptical over this idea of a fireplace because they saw it as being very inefficient.
Sure.
Because it is inefficient compared to the putting a stove in the middle of your house. But
so I would think
your house is getting filled with smoke.
I would think the home fireplace and the hay flooring would not have coexisted. Am I wrong about that?
You would think. Yeah, it's kind of strange, right? How we don't have too much in the record about homes being built with wood, because I guess they all went up in flames at some point.
A little hay chaser.
Yeah.
Let's start a fire right in the middle.
Right? When Britain was first founded and the Romans had left that area, how people hated the Romans so much that they had built these very modern style villas, but people of that time didn't populate them. They would build their own little shanties nearby, which was so strange.
Huh.
Even though these villas were much more modern and well designed than theirs were, they just built their own.
Yeah.
But they're not exactly sure if that's the reason. But it just seemed very odd that there's these, Roman villas next to these wood kind of shacks.
Well, maybe the rent was too damn high.
Yeah. Maybe.
Just extrapolating back from today. That's a guess.
It could be. Maybe it was the New York rent prices in medieval times.
That's right. The Romans charged a lot. That was their scam.
Mm-hmm.
They move in, they
Right.
add water and sewer, they build nice places, but they charge a ton of rent so they can just lay
No
around
rent
and
control.
collect that passive income.
Eat those grapes.
Uh-huh. Well, that sounds like a fascinating book. So how far into it are you?
Probably about 15% or so.
Oh, great. So
Not-
early.
Not very far. Early, but yeah, it's been pretty interesting. I didn't think I'd really enjoy it that much, but I like the way he really delves deep into this very obvious topic. He was not very obvious topic. He was just saying that one day he was sitting at his kitchen table and he was looking around his house and he said, I don't really know why this stuff is here. So he started going down a rabbit hole, and that's how this whole book started.
Huh. Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
So I would think based on the title, I would think it was sort of like an aggressive stalker, like wrote a book about your house and sent it to you. This is the history of your home. I know everything. And you'd be interested and horrified the whole time. Like, oh my God, so much detail. But it's interesting. That's great. Wow. That sounds like a really great mix. I was talking to a friend of mine recently who started the process of building a new home. And he did this a while back, and he's been talking to me about the trials and tribulations of dealing with, zoning and architects and like HOAs and all the different elements to, leveling bits of land and putting pipes in and all that kind of stuff. And it's been interesting to watch. Like, he's been very positive about it, very excited at times. And then at other times, I'm pretty sure he contemplated burning the whole thing down and starting over. So maybe we can get him on the show.
Tell him to put an oven in the living room.
Well, maybe you should
read
finish this
book.
book, and then we'll talk to him about what kind of hay he should put on the flooring.
Yeah. You don't want tile. You want hay. A lot of hay.
Instead of a treadmill, maybe a hamster wheel, just to complete the theme.
Right?
Yeah. So anyway, I was thinking it might be interesting to get him on the show to talk a little bit about what it's like designing and having a home built from scratch, something that not everybody does, but so many people have homes and they've done repairs and, modified their homes, decorated, things like that, that I think there's probably a lot in there that people can relate to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of people that would find that interesting, especially if they've never built one from scratch, because I'm sure that's a whole different type of project than just buying a home and redecorating or knocking a wall down. Yeah.
I think if he was Amish, it might be a little harder to identify with because he'd actually be participating in the building from the ground up. But instead, it's, he's a modern person. So it's a lot of dealing with bureaucracy and, technology, AutoCAD, things like that, stuff that people either have dealt with a little bit or have gotten close to in dealing with their own homes. So anyway, maybe you can talk more about that book and we'll get him on board as well.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Absolutely. So I have been watching Netflix because I'm really desperately trying to get in on this sponsorship that you got going. Tired of working for free. So I was watching.
Dare.
What'd you say?
Don't you dare. Netflix is mine. You get Peacock and what is that other one? Freevee
Paramount
TV
Plus,
or something?
Freevee. Yeah, Tubi.
Tubi.
I'm going to talk about Tubi every week. Well, I was watching a commercial on Tubi, and it's a really great commercial. It went on for 8 minutes.
Ads aren't that
free.
bad.
Yeah, I'm starting to like them. I miss them. I was forgetting what products to buy. So anyway, I was watching what they listed on Netflix as a new reality TV show called Love in the Wild. So it's one of those dating shows, right? So if you log into Netflix, it says Love in the Wild 2023. And I started watching it and I was like, it seems a little dated. Some of the, how like the reality genre, the reality dating subgenre, I guess, or the reality dating in a remote location subgenre has sort of evolved over time and become a bit more extreme and gone in certain directions. This one felt like a bit of a throwback, but I like that. I thought, oh, this sort of reminds me of back when, more like The Real World and less Housewives of whatever dumb city. So anyway, it's just a bunch of singles, and they're in Costa Rica, and they have to do challenges together. They get paired up to, paddle through the river or whatever. And then at the end, they have a little torch ceremony where they pick who they want to be shacked up with for the night. And then they go do it again the next day, and so on and so forth. But it was a little less, oh gosh, what's the word? The people on it, the contestants, seemed a little bit more people next door, right? They weren't quite as obviously dysfunctional and trying to build their network followers, like their Instagram followers and stuff like that. They just seemed more like regular people who were actually legitimately interested in dating. So I watched most of it. I skipped through a few of the challenges and things like that. But I was like, wow, these people after less than a week, like 3-4 days, are talking about how they found the person maybe that they're going to be with forever. Like they, some of them were like really serious about that. And every challenge they would pick each other and try to stay together. And if that got disrupted, it was all they talked about until they were done with the following challenge and then able to get back together. And I was like, this is really weird. Like you just don't see that in reality shows very often. And typically when people say stuff like that, they just sound like they don't know what they're talking about. Like they just seem really extreme, but these people didn't. So out of curiosity, I Googled it, and just to see the status of the couples. Love in the Wild was actually filmed in 2011. And there were, I think, like 6 couples that sort of emerged from it. The top 2 couples who competed in the last episode both got married and both have 2 kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's shocking.
I know.
That really is shocking.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? And
so it worked out.
It did. And they both, their pictures, there was an article, like none of them, neither of the couples, I guess, none of the people involved really stayed. They didn't do anything else on TV. They all have careers. They moved to get to be together, started raising their kids. Like they seemed very happy. There were nice photos of them. And Love in the Wild from 2011 got a second season as well. And I guess that was probably 2012. The second season had similar setup, same kind of deal. Also produced 2 couples who got married and have 2 kids.
Maybe this is the formula, right?
I mean, right? So this is a reality. It's a reality TV show about dating that got canceled after 2 seasons and successfully produced 4 couples and 8 children.
Yeah, I'm shocked.
I mean,
you would never think that, right?
It just really highlights the difference between what I guess is entertaining or gets viewers versus what actually works as like a dating experiment. All these reality shows that have dating all proclaim to be running some sort of experiment to figure out if you can spark love and find your match. But the producers, the people they hired to find contestants and match them, the setup of the show, I don't know what it was, but you're right. There's some sort of formula here that works.
It works as a real life dating experiment, but not as a series.
Yes. Which, what does that tell you?
What's the modern one that came out a couple of years ago that we watched like the whole season of?
Oh, I don't know.
Which is ridiculous.
We blew
it's
through
with the,
it.
With the what do they call it? Alana or something, which is really like an Alexa that tells them what to do.
Too hot to handle.
Too hot to handle. Yeah, exactly. Like those couples are really going to stay together. I'm sure raise families. All the ones that come out of there.
Right. Well, see, but that's the point. Exactly. That's a good contrast, right? That's a show that presumably gets a lot more viewers. There's a lot more social media engagement. It gets a lot more press. That's for sure. Whereas this show just kind of fell by the wayside. And I'm guessing Netflix dredged it up because they needed to fill in some space, right? They just wanted to keep content coming. And it's like our podcast, right? If you like film and entertainment news and discussions, and you like people talking about current events, there are about 1,000 podcasts that you would go through before you got to the bottom of the barrel and found us, right? But maybe we're the winning formula. You know?
Could be. Little by little, we're the underdog that kind of is moving up those charts,
That's right.
One place every 6 months until we get to the top spot in 2060.
Yeah, or more realistically, somehow podcasting networks will run out of content and they'll just begrudgingly advertise us.
We'll do something really interesting. The podcast networks are going to say to themselves, they're going to, instead of starting from the top podcasts, we're going to start at the bottom and see where we find that diamond in the rough. Right. And they're going to grab us.
But yeah, I think people have a really wrong idea about making a connection sometimes. And I know a lot of people know that these shows are just entertainment and they don't take it seriously, and good for them. But I think there are some people, and probably increasingly more and more people, who really don't understand, how this stuff works. And I'm kind of wondering if they could bring back this show, if they could resurrect it, and then see if they could continue to produce meaningful couples, that actually last and are happy.
Yeah, I wonder if you could do that with a new spin on that show or some other concept. But my big question is, why does Netflix say it's from 2023?
Yeah.
So whenever they buy something, they just say it's like the year it was acquired, not the actual year it was produced. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's because they figured people wouldn't watch it. Because I think if I saw 2011, I would just go I probably already saw it, or if it's canceled, it can't be that good. But it was decent. If you're interested in that kind of thing, there's a lot of attractive people, but not surgically enhanced so much. And they all had, I think, or most of them had real jobs. So they actually had careers, and this was just something they were doing, I think, for fun and for a free trip and stuff like that. So they were more down to earth, but it wasn't as extreme in any way as they usually do. The challenges weren't, crazy nuts, something that you're likely to injure yourself. Although one guy did break his toe.
And presumably they weren't completely wasted the whole time, in the Too Hot to Handle shows, which it's an interesting spin. Whenever they want to have them do some type of challenge, like in that show where, they can't hook up, they're they're going to have a huge party and a bonfire before then, and there's going to be unlimited alcohol just to see what happens.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, let's take unstable people, let's ply them with booze, and then throw a match in the middle and see what happens.
Yep, exactly. The formula for a hit reality show.
But not a successful marriage, I guess.
Clearly not. No.
Surprising no one.
Where did the show take place?
Costa Rica. They filmed it near Arenal, the volcano down there, which I've never been. I've been down to Costa Rica, but when I did not go to that area, I went kind of down the coast in the southern part. I did some scuba diving, went to the jungle down there. It was an amazing trip, and Costa Rica is incredible place to go visit if you haven't. So it was kind of neat to see, but they were just doing fun stuff, just sort of sliding down hills and going over rope bridges and things like that. So anyway, beautiful setting, attractive people, but fairly grounded. And I'm actually always, so this is just a personal interest of mine, but how do you choose contestants? And I think there are probably a lot of different philosophies around how to choose, where to find people. I think some of the modern reality shows for dating use Instagram to find people. They look for potential contestants on there. They probably message them, stuff like that. I think the old way was you go to a mall and you just put up a sign, or you go to a busy place or a bar district in a town or something. And these contestants were from all over the United States. So presumably there was a pretty broad search. I do happen to know as well that a lot of times, just from talking to people who do this for a living, the producers will reach out to their friends and they'll ask their friends if they know anyone, right? And so they'll use their personal networks too. So that sometimes is a strategy. And I think some of that stuff's probably old school. I think the newer approach is probably to use social media more. But anyway, these people, all the contestants of this show, if you watch it, all mostly seemed pretty down to earth to me, like pretty regular people. And even though they're very attractive, I think that was a part of the winning formula for relationships.
Sounds like a good show.
It's all right. Yeah. If you think about it while you're watching and there's other things to kind of make it interesting to you, yes.
Like doing laundry or something.
I was thinking more along the lines of asking yourself how they chose these people and how the producers make decisions about who matches with whom and stuff like that. But laundry works just as well. Yes. Dishes.
I would ask you, dishes, yeah. Vacuuming. So you can't really hear what they're saying.
Watching other shows while it's on.
Exactly. Scrolling on your phone. I would ask you this, though. How do you think they're choosing contestants for, let's say, the Too Hot to Handle in terms of personas, right? They must have some framework for doing it, right? People have to fit into certain buckets in order to create this conflict and interest between the characters themselves and to keep the audience hooked.
Yeah.
Right? Because if they have relatively stable, good-looking people, that's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
There has to be a way, like, how do you match those different personality types in a way that makes it combustible, right? So you have a constant drama happening.
Yeah. So there was a big controversy about this in the late 90s and early 2000s. A lot of shows like Real World were accused of using psychologists unethically. They were taking psychometric tools, not always psychologists, sometimes other people got access to these tools, but they were taking assessment tests, like personality assessment tests that look for, problems, dysfunction, like things about people's personalities that create issues, especially with others. They were using these tests and these assessment tools and evaluation techniques to find and choose people who would intentionally have conflicts that would be long lasting, that would be hard to deal with, like that would increase their stress levels and basically just be entertaining to other people. And that is incredibly unethical, right? It's sort of that like do no harm kind of thing. It's like, let's use some medical tools to create side effects, like that's not okay. So I don't know that anybody who wasn't directly involved knows exactly what was decided or done or what was and wasn't ethical and where the lines were and all that kind of stuff. But the general idea or the discussion around that was that it needs to stop, right? It's not okay. Like, choosing someone who has borderline personality disorder or narcissistic traits or histrionic behavior and traits and personality characteristics. And then choosing people who this person's father died of a particular disease and this other person has really strong opinions for various reasons that that's not a real thing or that, or displays the same characteristics or something like that. And then putting them in an enclosed space, basically, for an extended period and adding alcohol and probably other substances that aren't revealed. Maybe even saying things like, well, if you're going to be on the show, you can't have certain medications, or, we're going to suggest that you take additional medication. Like, who knows, right? That is, I understand why people who are ethically challenged would think that's a good idea, but it is really, really, really horrible. So that, I don't know what the current status of that is, but there was a lot of discussion around stopping that.
How do you think they navigate that now? Do you think there's a way to do this? I mean, I'm not saying this is ethical at all, but to continue this kind of non-ethical behavior in a way that kind of masks it. right?
Yeah.
Like, are there other types of personality traits that they could look at and say, oh no, that's just a really outgoing person, when in fact they have like aggression issues, or that person is, really just introverted, but no, they're just a bit shy. Like, how do you think they would skew that?
So I think they'd start with this idea of using informed consent. So, I mean, obviously there's going to be a ton of contracts, and I think this is a bigger issue legally, or the biggest threat to the production is legal. So they'll have an army of lawyers who try to cover every eventuality. They'll put a stack of documents in front of a contestant, discourage them sending these documents to their own lawyer, and have them just sign their life away, right? So I think that's where it starts. But from the ethical standpoint of a practitioner, they probably try to hide behind the concept of informed consent. Like, we explained it to them, right? Like, you can conduct research on people in part if you tell them this is what we'll be doing. Now, there are review boards that kind of have to go through this stuff if you're going to do an experiment. But there is a little bit of an idea, or there's a significant idea, that if the person is informed, then you can push it further, right? So I imagine they probably try to use that. Like, we told them, we explained it, right? They want to do this. They benefit. It's worth it to them to do this, to go through this risk, or to face this risk, because they're going to potentially benefit so much. So I bet that's part of it.
Do you think there's any way to do this ethically? Like this type of a show?
Yeah. So you can say, so if you say ethically, you're basically saying based on a set of ethical standards, right? Not personal ethics, but professional ethics. And that depends on the field and what their professional ethics are. Like, the professional ethics of lawyers and psychologists are very different, right? Just as an example, right? So I don't know what the professional ethics are of like TV producers or any of these other things. So
it sounds funny saying it, doesn't it?
Yeah. I would imagine there's some differences, is all I'm trying to say. So from that standpoint,
this joke will go viral. We'll clip this and put it up on all the social platforms
right before we get canceled.
Did you hear the one about the ethical TV producer?
Now that is funny. When you put it that way, right? I get the joke. Yeah. So to answer your question that way, yes, I'm sure according to their ethics, there are ways to do anything you want to do, basically. In mental health, the ethics hopefully are a little more stringent. And the answer there is no, there's not. You can't get away with just anything and expect to keep your license or your ability to practice or anything like that. But that's not always legally binding. So if someone surrenders their license, they can kind of do whatever with their education. So you can get around it that way too. Personal ethics, like, do I think that there's a way to put people in an environment together, like these kind of dating shows, and select contestants and have it be entertaining and not do harm, right? And not violate other ethical principles? Yes. I just don't think that's the trend. I don't think the way reality shows are going, I think it's getting harder to do that. I don't think it's getting easier. Like, for example, this show from 2011, I wouldn't be surprised if they did all right. Like, if there was nothing too shady, or if you really could go through every decision made and take a look at it, there might be a couple of things that are questionable here and there, but I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the day you were like, no, I think it's okay. Like, there are a few things that people chose to do. They may not have been fully clear on how this could affect them or their lives or their mental health, but at the end of the day, reasonably, they could be expected to understand that. And if there is a problem, the show would have offered some support, or there's support available and the person has access to it. So that's okay. Right. So I think that's possible. But when you look at a show like, what was the one where they took all the Netflix reality people and put them all together from different shows? Oh gosh, what's that one?
It's another dating show.
It was
right?
like Second Chance at Love or something. I don't know. I'm sure somebody's screaming it at their phone.
Something like that. Yeah.
So something like that, where the entire premise of the show is to take some of the, how do I put this nicely, most complicated,
colorful.
Good, here we go. who had not come out of their particular reality shows and stable relationships, surprisingly, and then just pour fountains of alcohol, like an entire swimming pool of alcohol, into each one of them every single night, and then just film it, right? Where they are trying to create a persona that's, interesting and build followings and all that kind of stuff. No, I don't think there's a way to do that ethically without, causing harm or creating problems. And we're not even talking about the impact on audiences. Like, what do people who are younger, because there's no age restriction on watching this stuff, not really. Nothing that's enforced. So how does this affect the way an 11-year-old develops, right? Like, I'm not even going to dive into that because the answer is not well, right? So no, I don't think, and in some of these ones where there's a lot of lying and manipulation, there was a reality show that made the news, was it last year, year before? I think it was maybe the year before, where was it Fuckboy Island? Something like that. I think that was the name of it, right? Where it was like 3 women.
I missed that one.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Is that on Tubi or what?
It was on something other than Netflix, so you'll never see it. You'd violate your contract if you watched it.
Yeah. I'm not even supposed to mention that other network. We're going to have to bleep that
out. So yeah, it was basically the premise was you've got 100 men or 30 or something, and half of them are there supposedly to just have fun, like they're not serious about relationships. And then the other half are supposed to be like nice guys who really do care about that. And then there's money on the table, and the women are trying to sort through.
Are they nice guys who finish last?
Yeah. Yeah. And there was one guy who sort of tricked all the women, or tricked one of the women or something. And at the very end, I guess if a woman, so the women have to pick a guy, I guess. I don't know if have to is the right way to put that, but they're supposed to pick a guy. And then once they pick the guy, he gets half of the money and she gets the other half, right? But he has the option, if he's not truly a nice guy, to take all the money. And so one of the women picked a guy, and that guy was like, oh yeah, I'm so into you, and I'm a nice guy and all that. And then at the end he said, I'll take the money. And the woman was like, what? And heartbroken and all this kind of stuff. And the show didn't give him the money. They said no, because their read of their audience, which I think is primarily female from what I read, is that would just be unacceptable to them, to have a guy trick a woman for, I don't know, 10 weeks or however long, 3 weeks, however long the show is, and then her end up hurt and like a victim. And it was on the heels of the Me Too movement, so that was probably part of it, but they said no, and they ended up like donating a fraction of what he was supposed to get to charity, and then I think that was it. Like, yeah.
What a strange thing when they set up the premise
yes.
of the whole show.
Yep. So anyway, my point is, if you go through the decision making of the various professionals involved from start to finish for that show, were there likely some ethical violations? I don't know. Like, I can't accuse them of anything because I don't really know. If I had to guess, not being part of the production, then I would guess, yeah, probably. Probably there was some stuff in there that is a little bit questionable, especially with how it played out in the media afterward and with the decisions they made. So yes. And so the bigger question is, do we care? As a society, do we care? Is this like, there's plastic in the ocean, like seems like a bigger deal, or is this like a really big deal? Is this eroding our culture, our valuing human life? Has the population gotten so high that now we're starting to view each other, as not particularly important? Is this, are we a few steps away from the Running Man? Like, is that where this is going?
Are we, or is this just a reflection of society in general?
Yeah, that's my question, right? And are we okay with that? Do we want to draw a line somewhere or not? No.
No, probably not.
Just keep the entertainment coming.
We got to see how this plays out. Yeah, there's how many channels out there, how many platforms that we need to make content for. What are we going to start figuring out what's ethical and what's not ethical to put on there? We'll run out of content.
We're just waiting for the first dating show to introduce a flamethrower that they can use against each other. The race is on.
I could. Why did that just naturally come into my head as a possibility? Like in how it would be set up too. Like the flamethrowers in a cage in the middle of the villa, you know, and they get to see it and they're talking about it. I wonder who's going to get it.
Oh, man.
You know, Bobby shouldn't get it because, you know, he's been partying all night. And what if he gets a key to the cage? He's going to go crazy.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that's where we're ultimately headed. So we probably should care, and we probably should, as a society, decide on some ethical standards for this kind of stuff and have someone enforce it, but we won't. I don't think we'll do that.
No, I think we're pretty much doomed.
Yeah.
We'll probably have AI decide, and it'll be like the Running Man,
It's a Squid
or
Game.
like a Hunger Games or whatever.
Yeah.
And that'll be the end of it.
Yep. That
And
makes
for the audience, we didn't pre-plan this conversation at all. It was just off the cuff.
It's just always on
Silly.
our minds.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. All right. So should we get to the main dish today?
Let's do it.
All right. So the movie we watched is called I Saw the Devil, and that is a 2010 South Korean horror thriller. Well received. A lot of awards. It was directed by Kim Ji-woon, who directed 2013's The Last Stand, which was Arnold's return to film. Did you watch that movie?
I really enjoyed that movie.
The Last Stand?
I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was good. Did you see it?
I watched about half of it. It's got Johnny Knoxville in it. I think maybe I watched like 2/3. It's an action flick. It's got some good stuff in it. I went into it with a lot of expectations. You know, I wanted sort of classic pre-Governator film, and this one felt a little bit slower, a little bit smaller. I don't know. It just didn't. I don't think the problem is as much with the film as the baggage that was brought into it. For me personally. But I didn't realize this movie, I Saw the Devil, is essentially, I think, what got the director that film. And that was a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah. To have a Schwarzenegger film as his first, was it his first American film, right? Or
Yes,
film in English?
I believe that's right. And it was, you know, of course, Arnold's big return. So it wasn't just your everyday Schwarzenegger flick. It was a pretty significant one in his career. So interesting choice. I read a little bit about that. They chose this director because they felt like he did a great job bringing more out of genres, out of a particular, you know, what a film is, you know, the setting, the content, everything. He really enhancing that and bringing more elements out. I don't know. Interesting. I just thought, and it's seemingly off the back of I Saw the Devil. So this film stars, and I hate butchering people's names, but I guess better me than you, right? Choi Min-sik, I believe is his name. He was the lead in Old Boy.
Great film.
Yeah, famous Korean actor. I've actually never seen that film. I think there's an American version, but I need to watch Old Boy, the Korean one.
You have to watch the Korean one.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You'll really enjoy it.
He also starred in Lucy. Did you see Lucy?
A long time ago, yeah.
Scarlett Johansson. What if we used more than 20% of our brain? And she gets superpowers and becomes like a genius or whatever. Anyway, so he's in that film as the drug lord who uses her as a mule. I think it's early in the film, if I recall. So he got some work off of that. Or this film certainly forwarded his career. Then there is another major actor in this, Lee Byung-hun. He's the Korean Central Intelligence Agency
Operative, yeah.
Operative, yeah. Who is the other lead in this movie. Do you recognize him from anything else?
I recognize him, but I don't know where I've seen him.
Okay. Yeah, he's done some stuff, but maybe not stuff that everybody remembers him from. So again, I think largely off the back of I Saw the Devil. He was the T-1000 in Terminator Genesis, so another connection with Arnold.
And fun fact about that film, I fell asleep in the first 5 minutes. So that's probably why.
That is a fun fact. Is that how you review those Terminator movies? Like how many Z's?
This one got all the Z's. 10 Z's out of 10.
Percentage awake.
The credits were amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of loud. Right?
Yeah.
He was also Storm Shadow in the first 2 G.I. Joe live action movies.
That's right. That's where I've seen him.
Yep. And he was in Squid Game.
Interesting. So he's a big movie star in
Well, that's the thing, right? So you suggested this film, and it's a big award winner. It was controversial, and we'll talk about that and why, but it certainly got a lot of people to notice it and got a lot of awards. The director, also successful. Both the main actors continue to be, very busy, like working big budget stuff, A-listers. So this is a pretty significant film in modern film history.
I suggested it because I had heard a lot about it. And again, Netflix kept suggesting it. So I said to myself, you know what? I should probably take a look at this one. I felt it was a film that it really checked off all the boxes in terms of filmmaking for me. From the camera movement to the score to the intensity of the acting and the unpredictability of the lead characters, both of them.
Right.
And it was just highly, highly entertaining, even though it's very horrifying and very intense. But I thought it flew by. The pacing was really great as well. What did you think of it overall?
It was just horrifying, truly. It was disgusting and brutal. It was hard to watch. I found myself skipping through the frequent torture scenes. I had enough of torture about 7 minutes into it. I think I kind of hit my torture limit, so I had the remote handy to get through this one. It's definitely a quality film, but some of those qualities are pretty bad. It's if you're not into watching fairly realistic human suffering inflicted by other humans, if you don't like seeing people brutalized, then I'm not going to recommend this film for you. It is extreme, and the camera is unflinching, as they say.
It really is. There were so many times I thought it would move away from what was happening. Nope. You're right. You're right there watching.
Rock solid.
Yeah.
It is mounted. It ain't moving. And I don't need that in my day. There's enough human suffering in my day that I don't need people to act out additional amounts in a very realistic fashion. So I would say don't watch this film. I not because it's not well written, and not because the acting and the direction and the cinematography, all very good. I don't really have any criticisms beyond the nature of the story and the extreme brutalism that people endure. It's just, that's partly why I watched 2011's Love in the Wild, just to get the taste out of my mouth as I watched this film.
I've got to admit that I watched some YouTube cooking videos afterwards. Just to kind of...
Well, because you wanted some long pig ideas.
Oh, God.
You disgusting monster. So what do you think the story was?
It's the really cat and mouse game between a CIA operative and a serial killer who kills a CIA operative's wife. And really the chase that happens between the operative hunting down the serial killer as well as the police hunting the serial killer, but they're always a step behind. So it really focuses in on these two very intense characters, one hell-bent on revenge and the other one just hell-bent on continuing being a serial killer. He just has absolutely no remorse over anything that he does. And really, he's furious at the fact that this guy's even trying to stop him. Almost like he sees him as a rival, that he's always trying to one-up and beat. So, yeah, I think overall, I'd say that's really the main driving force in in the film.
Yeah. Yeah. You see, describe it as cat and mouse, but I think part of the point of the film is that it's sort of cat and cat, you know? The Korean agent guy is presented as very clean cut and law and order, right? And when his wife, who's pregnant, we find out, is brutally murdered and dismembered, and pieces of her body are found early in the film. And he decides to go about revenge. It's not your typical like payback scenario. I think the point of the film in large part is that this agent, what happened essentially either transformed him or more realistically revealed that he is also a sociopath. So his method of revenge is extended torture. And he very clearly only a little bit cares how much it hurts everyone else. Like, he keeps catching and releasing this serial killer, knowing full well that the guy will inflict pain and suffering on random other people. And it doesn't really seem to bother him that much. Like, he lets it go on pretty far and lets the guy kill people and rape people and things like that. And then he kind of gets around to stepping in. But he waits until the killer is in a point where he feels safe, or he's experiencing that, I don't know, joy or relief, satisfaction that he gets from killing and brutalizing others before the agent steps in and interrupts it, right? Like, just to make it that much more frustrating and painful for the serial killer. So it's not like a good guy, going after a bad guy.
That's a very good point. Yeah, it's really two very bad guys who, just because they happen to fit into these roles, are playing things out in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's nothing
they're just
good.
It's just two killers who have different styles, essentially. And I don't know, I would assume anyone who watches this film would figure that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of things that happen early on that make it abundantly clear that the good guy, quote unquote, is also bad. And so you have really the only good people are the victims, right? They just get kind of caught up in these two insane individuals battling with each other, essentially. And he doesn't seem, they made a point to have the agent crying, right? And like tears and, showing more emotion and sort of sadness around some of the stuff that happens. But I found that a little bit either forced or confusing. It seemed out of place a bit. What did you think about his emotional expression, the characters?
I actually felt it was appropriate, because I felt like they were trying to show that, unlike the serial killer, he had the ability to have a certain sense of remorse, even though it wouldn't override his actions. I think the difference is he really knows what he's doing is evil, but he can't stop himself. And there's a part of him that sees himself the way that he was before all of this happened. It's almost like, the murder of his wife just opened up the floodgates. Like you mentioned before, he became a different person altogether. Maybe it just awakened something within him that he just couldn't control. And I think that was the conflict that he was having. But it's not enough of a conflict for him to say like, oh, whoa, I'm taking this way too far now, I'm going to stop. It's just him understanding that he can't stop. Maybe like an addict who can't stop doing what they're doing, even though they know it's wrong. That's what I got from it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's probably closer to what was intended. I just struggled to get there with that realization. I kept reading the central agent, or the intelligent agent, as already violent, and this simply just revealed aspects of himself. And so I struggled with why he doesn't see that. Like, it was confusing. At times I thought, well, he must have realized this is who he is by now. But it seems like he didn't. So anyway, another interesting theme here, or point that the film seemed to be making, was about the cyclical nature of violence. In particular, the end. And again, as always, we spoil everything in films. So feel free, if you want to watch this movie, not to listen to the rest of the podcast. But at the end, he creates essentially, or potentially creates, another killer, right? So the way in which he chooses to execute the person who killed his wife is in front of that person's child.
Yep.
Right. And that child was obviously already troubled. So you throw in a, decapitation of your father in front of you. And my guess is, by movie logic, this means at some point this kid's going to be brutalizing other people, and around we go. Right. Is that consistent with your read of this?
I actually hadn't thought about it in that way. I mean, I had stopped by just thinking he just wants to destroy his family the way that his family, the agent's family, had been destroyed. So he just wants to inflict the ultimate pain. And what better way to do that than to actually accidentally cause his family to kill the serial killer, But I didn't take it. But I see what you're saying about the son. I could see that being almost like a sequel, 20 years in the future, and what happens with the son. But that's really interesting. But yeah, I think you would definitely be creating another serial killer there. Or maybe he hated his father so much that seeing that is traumatizing for him, but it doesn't cause him to become a serial killer like his father, because he seemed to hate him from the get-go, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the problem with what I just said. If that's what the movie intended, is that family was already broken, right? They didn't have contact with him. There was no, it's not the same. It's not like he was part of a facade of a happy family and then that was all ruined by this. So, maybe you could think of it as the revenge cycle. That kid did see the face and could conceivably figure out who the agent was and then come after him for revenge at some point. But like you said, that he didn't seem to really care about his father that much. So I don't know. That message seemed a little garbled if it was intended. But I do think there was a theme, or the idea that violence is cyclical, which is ironic for a film that is so violent.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of the performance by the serial killer?
I mean, I think he crushed it. Like, that actor, it was incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
It really now characterizes how I think about that actor. And I'm sure that he's done a lot of stuff where he's very different, and the actor seems very talented. So, but he portrayed that in a very convincing way, I think.
Like, extremely layered.
What did you think?
Performance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I think it's one of the things I enjoyed about this movie was really the unpredictability of him. Like, at any moment, you just didn't, you're seeing him do all these awful things, but you're not exactly sure when he's going to do what. And it's almost like this constant ebb and flow of like the calm before a storm, and then a calmness again, and then an intensity that comes out of seemingly nowhere. And then it's like he's constantly trying to bring himself back to act like a normal person for just a few seconds, so he can continue doing what he's trying to do. It seems like there's just this constant rage bubbling underneath him, but he knows if he doesn't control it somewhat, and you could see it a lot with the conversation that he had with the doctor that he goes to see. Like, he's just waiting, like he can't wait to be violent, but he's trying to suppress it, because he knows he has to get something from him. So he's like keeping himself normal for just a few seconds at a time in order to get some exchange of something that he needs, and then explode again. It was a pretty incredible performance, and the arrogance, like all of these. What would he be considered, do you think, as like a sociopath, a psycho? I don't really know the difference between sociopath, psychopath, or any of the other, I guess, psychological paths that he would have.
Yeah. So I think he'd be a sociopath because he doesn't have any psychosis. He's not hearing or seeing things or experiencing things that don't exist. So a psychopathic killer would be somebody who, my dog told me to do it. That's the famous one, although likely, what was that guy's name? Shoot. He lied, most likely.
Son of Sam?
Probably. No, isn't that the guy who shot people in their cars? Berkowitz, is that anyway? So yeah, so the idea that someone is killing because they believe, oh, I killed my wife because she was possessed by a demon, and if I didn't kill her, it would be the end of the world, right? I've been hunting and killing people of a certain type because, they're, what's a good crazy thought? Because if I don't, they'll kill me, right? If that's not true, obviously, then that's psychosis, and the person is going to be very unhinged. Was it Raising Cain? John Lithgow did kind of a version of a psychotic serial killer, I believe. He was supposed to have multiple personalities, but there was clearly psychosis in there. This, on the other hand, I don't recall anything from the performance or the dialogue or the script that would suggest that this character was not connected to reality. I think he was more of a sociopath. He had problems with anger and viewed himself as, I think he viewed humans or people as objects. And so he would just sort of enact violence upon them for reasons that are not entirely made clear by the story. So he would be he lacks empathy, right? So when he inflicts violence, like the character in the beginning sort of pleads for mercy by saying, I'm pregnant. She's like, please don't kill me. And he's like, why?
Right.
Right. And that's sort of classic sociopathy, right? And then she says, because I'm pregnant. And he's like, so? Like, why would that? Like, you're not giving me a reason. A reason would be because if you kill me, you'll get caught. You'll never be able to kill again, or I have a bomb in me and I'll explode and it'll kill you, right? Like, that's something that would resonate with a sociopath, potentially, but not because you'll feel bad if you do it. Like, that's not going to work. So I think they're probably both supposed to be portraying sociopaths, essentially.
I see. In that end scene, when the serial killer, he starts acting as if he's remorseful, that was pretty brilliant. Mm-hmm. And then how he comes back and basically says, I'm better than you. Even though he was in that situation where he must have known that was the end of the road for him. But he just, right up until the end, he was just completely unrepentant and just wanted to win this game that he'd kind of devised in his head, that was being played.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What do you think happens at the end with the CIA operative? Like, do you think now
he's on the run?
And now is he just damaged forever? Obviously, he's not a CIA operative anymore, but is he back to the way he was before all of this started? Is he done? Is that it for him, or is he still the same character? Because of the breakdown, it seems to imply that he, this whole saga is over, and he's quote unquote normal or back to normal, I thought.
Yeah, I think maybe you understand this character better than I did. I was a little confused by this character. So I think your guesses are probably more consistent with if there were a hypothetical sequel, like what we would see this character's journey be. So I don't know. What do you think? Where do you think he goes from here?
And I think he's on the run. But the interesting thing is that I don't think he would stay on the run for long. I think he would turn himself in. He might be prosecuted, and I'm saying might because of the serial killer, going after the captain of the police. And I think he would protect him. That's just what I thought might happen, because they wanted this guy caught, right? And he essentially caught him in a very unethical way, of course, but he finally got him, right? So I wonder if in the police's mind, he's not as bad as we're viewing him.
Well, I think there's a narrative that could be created, right? If you ignore things like he caught the guy early and repeatedly let him go, right? So if the story told in a court is not consistent with the story that we saw, then yeah, I guess there is a way in which he comes out with some semblance of his life back. But I would think at the very least, his idea of who he is and his comfort level with his own anger and violent capabilities. I don't know. It's up in the air. Like, it could go any which way.
I mean, just the idea that he would torture this guy in that way was just so insane, that he's just tracking him down. He beats him to a pulp up until the point where he's going to die, and then lets him go, and then repeats his process. And who knows? He might have been doing this for ages if he could have gotten away with it, and the tracker still worked, you know?
Right.
Which is pretty insane.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was what they wanted you to focus on in this kind of film. But for me, I kept focusing on all the people who kept getting hurt and their lives kept getting ruined because of this strategy, I guess, that the agent was using to get revenge.
It was not a good strategy. Not the least. He just didn't really seem to care. Everything else was kind of like collateral damage, you know? As long as he can chase this guy down as long as possible and inflict maximum pain right up until the point where he kills him, and he can repeat the process, he's fine. He didn't seem to care about any of those people at all, you know?
Right.
Which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It was hard to watch. This is a tough film to get through. It reminded me a little bit of Seven.
Definitely.
Which is certainly towards the end in particular, I thought, when the killer, the original killer, I guess now, gets a little bit off the chain. And he comes after the police chief and his daughter. So for those of you who aren't going to watch this, the main character, the Central Intelligence agent, is married to the daughter of the local police chief, and she's the one who's killed. He also has another daughter, the younger sister of our main character's wife. And the serial killer figures out the identity of the agent who's tracking him. I guess he knows from news coverage that, you know, he killed the woman who's the daughter of the police chief. And once he gets off the chain a little bit, he goes after the police chief and his daughter. And I think I kind of missed this. Maybe you can answer this question. Did he kill the police chief's other daughter as well? They sort of found her in an alley or something. She was all wrapped up or whatever. Did you?
I don't know, because he wrapped up the sister in the same way before he actually killed her. So I don't know if she was wrapped up and still alive, but barely alive, or she was actually dead. That's a good question. I don't think they really revealed it. She was in bad shape. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Both of them were. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, anyway, from that point on, like once the killer is kind of loose and he has abducted the other daughter of the police chief, it did remind me a lot of Seven. And I was wondering if we were going to get a Head in a Box or some equivalent, right? Like just as sort of a lesson to the agent, like you're playing a dangerous game and look who paid the price, and the other daughter as well, you know?
I thought the camera work was amazing, especially toward the end. The way he was able to use really tight close-ups on the characters in these perfect moments that really amped up the intensity along with that score. And I think in general, just the way the camera moved throughout that movie was really good, especially how he picks up the killer who's giving himself up in the middle of the street when he knocks the door off the truck and just like grabs him. I really thought that was really well done. It built tension very, very well, I thought, throughout the movie. I know it's like hyper violent and really difficult to watch, but just like it had, if it wasn't so violent, it would have made it better, in my opinion. Like it's so graphic and so difficult to watch that it makes you look away, when I think there are ways to get around that type of violence that is still very visceral with like sound, you know, or like the after effects of what he's doing and kind of letting you imagine what's happening. Kind of like Hitchcock would do in something like Psycho,
right?
You know?
Sure.
Which would have made it a little more powerful. This was very in your face, like shock value, almost like Hostel, you know?
Right. Yeah. Eli Roth, I think, is the better comparison here than something like Silence of the Lambs. I think, you know, Silence of the Lambs did a great job of having the same brutality, but not exposing the audience to it in such an unpleasant way and potentially unhealthy way. But Eli Roth seems to go right for this kind of thing, just shock value for the sake of shock value. Like, I got to find a way to stand out, so I'm just going to use ultra violence or work through my own baggage by brutalizing actors on the screen. I don't know, but it definitely, I think, turned off a lot of people, and myself included. Again, I'm okay saying that a lot about this film is good, but I definitely wouldn't recommend anyone inflict this upon themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's a movie that, because the acting is so good, because the cinematography is so good, and the sound design and all the other aspects of making a movie so good, it is kind of shocking the level of violence that's in it. And really, in a lot of ways, unnecessary to kind of get the point across, because I think the other elements of the movie could really carry it forward in the same way or better, I would argue, than just showing these graphic scenes of like torture and butchery. It's really kind of, you don't need to see like a big bucket full of body parts to know that he's dismembering a body. You can do shots from behind and imply it, but not show it.
Yeah. Well, no, that's actually a really great suggestion. So let's go with that for a second. So when he's dismembering, for example, I think fairly early in the film, if they did a shot from behind where the light is in front of him so that he can see what he's doing, and the camera is, a good 10, 15, 20 feet back. And so in a relatively dark room. So you're getting this light blocked by him. You can't really see exactly what he's doing, but the sound effects make it pretty obvious. And at some point you see, shadowy outlines of a body part, or even just sort of like a low light, visible arm kind of being chucked off or something. Like, if that's cut right, I think that's more scary and more memorable, and not something that people will intentionally try to block. Like the scenes that I saw, my brain was immediately like, no, censor. That's not, you don't need that, So I think you can walk that line more artistically in a way that leaves a more disturbing impression.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even a shot where, the camera's panning across a bunch of his tools of the trade, and like maybe there's like old blood splatter on it, and you hear what he's doing. That's a lot more graphic to me and much more disturbing than actually showing body parts. I know what they're trying to make him like dehumanize him, like it's almost like he is just a killing machine who has absolutely no empathy, but there are definitely ways to do it. And I think his acting in the script was strong enough to show that without having to show you this graphic violence,
Yeah.
It would have just been more creative, I think, to do it.
Yeah. And again, potentially leaving more of an impression, and movies are supposed to be entertainment, right? This isn't an educational film. So I don't know. I would question the entertainment value because of that. But hey, a lot of this is personal, so I can understand there's going to be a wide gamut of reactions to that aspect of the film. So what else? Anything else in this movie that you thought we should cover or talk about, figure out?
I mean, in terms of a story, it isn't extremely layered, right? It's more, like you said, a cat versus cat. Chase,
Yeah.
I guess one thing was the kind of interlude there with the cannibal. What exactly was going on there?
Wow. Yeah, that was interesting. That actor also played that character very well.
He was great.
He was good. That's a hard character to play well. So for those of you who aren't going to watch this, there's a point in the film where our serial killer is running away from our agent. He's been caught and released again, and every time he's caught and released, he's injured in an additional way. So the guy's hurting. So he flees to the home of another serial killer. There's a lot of killers in this film, like randomly. But our serial killer knows another serial killer who's a cannibal, and that cannibal has a girlfriend. And I guess they took a mansion from a wealthy family, and the cannibal has been in the process of butchering the family and consuming them one by one. So there's one family member left, the like youngest girl or child, and so he at one point is planning to kill her, and that's when our agent steps back in and decides to prevent that. So anyway, what was your question about that interlude there, that part of the story?
What was the relationship between them? I didn't really understand it. Did they know each other beforehand? Had he kind of mentored this cannibal into, how to become a killer? It was very odd. Like, how did they even come across each other? I don't know if I missed it or what.
There was some dialogue dropped about how in the past they had known each other and talked about overthrowing the government, and like the implication I got was that they had somehow connected either over the internet or by chance. And I imagine, and our serial killer that we've been following is a little bit older. He's the dominant one. The cannibal is the weaker one, and they have long since established that power differential. So I got a little bit of a mentor-mentee kind of vibe from them. I don't know. It wasn't really explicitly outlined. Like, we didn't get like a history or too much that I saw. So I think they had a pre-existing relationship. They had apparently stayed in contact with each other, and this was a place of refuge for our killer. And the cannibal wasn't dumb. He provided an outside perspective that helped the serial killer figure out who was after him and why, and start to turn the tables. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just tacked on. It was an important part of the plot.
Yeah, it was interesting.
It was also interesting to me that the agent didn't kill them. He didn't kill the cannibal or the girlfriend.
That was true. But he did get kind of nasty with him in that hospital room, though. That was...
Oh, that's right. He went back later.
Yeah, that was not...
Did he kill him then? I don't
He
know
told
if
him he was going to give him a permanent smile. So there was that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was disgusting.
Yeah.
I kind of skipped
that was pretty
the
gross.
End of that one. Yeah. But my point is, when he first encountered them, he didn't kill the cannibal and his girlfriend. So it's not about justice, right? He's not trying to stop people from killing, right? Our agent is entirely consumed by his mission to get even and make this guy suffer and I guess regret or feel what he thinks his wife felt. So he doesn't care about anyone else or who gets hurt. Like, there's no justice here at all. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, he was more like the serial killer than not. And that was pretty abundantly clear.
Yep, they both needed to be stopped, and those Keystone cops weren't going to do it.
No. They were always there, half hour too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they form like a nice little group. They're never spread out. They're not like doing different things. It's just a big mob of morons
standing around, waiting.
Yeah, but surprised constantly by everything that's happening.
True.
Good. Anything else about this movie that stood out to you?
No, that's it. You should watch Old Boy.
Yeah. I do think I need to get around to that, but this movie did not make me want to do that. I don't think it's fair to kind of judge Old Boy by this, but I might need a little break from that actor after some of the brutality in this film. So any questions for the audience?
Actually, my question for the audience would be, could this be made into a series?
Oh, interesting.
Tell
me more.
Maybe this guy, after this incident, he makes it his mission to hunt down other serial killers in the country in the same way that he hunted this one down. So he becomes almost like kind of like a legend, like an urban legend who hunts down serial killers. Would that work?
That changes. Yeah, that changes one of the key elements of the show. Right. So, or the movie. So I don't think the agent, I think if you make the agent a good guy, like a, what do you call those good guys who are kind of anti-hero? Isn't that the term? Right. So actually, good question. Is this agent an anti-hero in this?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
I don't think he is. By my understanding of that term, he does not qualify as a hero who has the dressings of a villain, or who's like sort of a bad guy in a way, or seems like a bad guy, but in reality is actually the hero or a hero.
He's just a bad guy.
I think he's just a bad guy, right? So if you do a series where you have him going after serial killers, then the series, I think, would do itself and the film justice by continuing to show every week that there are people who are hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Every episode, there are, innocent bystanders who get caught up in his game with this new person he's chasing, and he doesn't care, right? He only steps in when it fits his path or his plan for revenge, not to protect them from anything. So I think you would have to carry that forward, and I don't know how long people would tolerate that, how long audiences or how broad of an audience would tolerate that.
Yeah, maybe an alternative to that would be a movie about the rise of the serial killer himself. Like, how did he become this way? With that broken family, he has the kid. There's just so many unanswered questions there that I think it could make for a very good movie. And what does the audience think?
Yeah, that's really the question. Like, if this intellectual property landed in your lap, what would you do? Saturday morning cartoon? What do you think? Would you follow the agent and talk about his life after this? And what would be your end game? Would you want to show him becoming someone who was also brutalizing others, right? Like, maybe he had so much anger and rage directed towards himself that he engaged in increasingly risky or even intentional self-harm. Like, did he feel like he needed to get revenge on himself? That would fit the character in a certain way.
That's true.
Would he become calloused? Would he lean further into that and become the villain of someone else's story? I don't know. There are a lot of ways you could go. Is there a path to redemption for this guy? Can he come back? What would that take for him to find love again, or care for someone and develop trust and a sense of security in life? I don't know. Yeah. I mean, there's something you could do there. But I guess the biggest question is, what do people want to see? So that's what I would want to know. Like, what would you want to see from this intellectual property? Would you want like a prequel? Would you want, what was the prequel? Red Dragon?
Yeah.
No.
I think it's Red Dragon.
Yeah. Would you want like early Hannibal stuff here and follow the serial killer's creation? Would you want to follow the agent and see where he went after this? I don't know. Or do you have a better idea? Any other questions for the audience?
No, that's my big one.
Yeah, I think that's the big one. Is this story over? Or is there more that you could tell or talk about or explore before, even during or after? I mean, there's certainly a lot of people who got pulled into this, and each of those characters could have their own story. I mean, for example, there was the taxi ride, which confused the hell out of me. Remember when the serial killer gets picked up on the side of the road in the middle of the night in a remote area, and it's like, how many serial killers are there?
Right.
Just floating around.
This makes Korea seem so scary. I mean,
I was just full of serial killers
running into each other.
Yeah, I don't know. Just bumping into each other in the middle of the night.
Strange.
Right? All right. So as always, thank you to the people who made this project. Thank you to the listeners. You can reach the show at DontEncourage@gmail.com. You can let us know what you think about this particular story, the violence, and where you would go with it, if at all. You can join our fans and trolls on YouTube if you'd like. You can find us on Instagram or what's left of Twitter. Check out the show notes for more information, and we will see you next time.
Take care, everybody.